Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel Duran, Head of Marketing at Citrus Lime, and welcome to our Better Connected webinar. I'm delighted to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining the call. We've got a few people continuing to join, so just going to wait for people to join, and we can get as many people on the session as possible. But our Better Connected webinar is a three-part conversation, really. We're going to look at the independent cycling retail industry in three parts. The first is the supplier relationship and the buying decisions involved in that. Then there's the channel, or where customers are looking at independent cycling retailers, where they choose to buy. And the last part will be around the customer experience. So three really important parts of the industry, looking at things from every angle, really. And, you know, as a marketing team, we mulled things over, wondered how best we could have this conversation. We thought about a panel discussion with multiple people. In the end, what we decided on was to get one real expert on to have that conversation with us. And we're very, very grateful to be joined here today by Jay Townley. Jay, how are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate your time. Like I say, we're going to cover that conversation pretty extensively over the next hour or so. If anyone has any questions as we go along, it would be great if you can pop that in the Q&A. What we will probably do is review any questions towards the end of the session. But if anybody wants to pop in where they're joining us from, please feel welcome to do so. It just means that we can be added in. Actually, I'm going to say don't use the Q&A box. I can see everybody is in the chat box. Use the chat. The chat is much, much better for visibility. So if you're joining us from around the world, please pop in that chat box where you're joining us from. I'm just going to pop in a little test there and say hi. So everybody should be able to reply to that and just pop us a message to say where you're joining from. So Jay, pretty much everyone joining the call is going to know who you are, right? But for the uninitiated, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the questions?
Okay, I won't take a lot of time with this because we want to get to what what you've asked as well.
Sure.
I started in the bicycle industry as a young lad in 1957 when I was in junior high school in St. Paul, Minnesota, Hazel Park Bicycle and Skate Exchange. And was fortunate because I was hired by two young fellas that had made a decision to leave their jobs and buy this bike shop.
Right.
And it was at a point where it was primarily fix-it. It was a fix-it shop. They did welding, did hobbies, there was kind of a mixture. And so I watched this evolution. And I was fortunate when I got to high school to be in a distributive education class, which essentially is a junior and senior. I was taught retailing because I was at the point where I was tested. They felt I was going to not go on to college. I would go on to retail trades would be a good thing for me. And so I was able to apply what I was learning in school, and which included, by the way, having a certified workplace. So my DE teacher went to the bike shop and talked to the guys and certified that workplace for me. So I learned things as a junior in high school about cash registers. Now, we didn't have computers. So Dan, you got to understand that for the people on the call, we did not have computers, much less the idea that we would be on the internet, we'd be dealing with any kind of POS systems.
Yeah.
But we learned what there was. And so now, segue, I took that to a process of learning, and that led to my really getting interested in education in high school to the point that I was able to go on to college. And so what I studied when I was in at the University of Minnesota was distributive education. I wanted to be a teacher to teach retailing. That in turn led to my sending some things through my employers, because I still work for Hazel Park Cycle Center, to the Schwinn Bicycle Company. In the day back, and we're talking the 60s, 50s and 60s, Schwinn had 25% market share in the United States. It was like Raleigh in the UK.
Of course, yeah.
So I was fortunate because as a young person, I was recently married, starting a family. I was hired by the Schwinn Bicycle Company in 1965, and
Mhm.
specifically to work on dealer education. I moved to Chicago in 1966, spent 24 years there.
Mhm.
And my education was, to me, fantastic. Schwinn, as you're well aware, in 1966 was a major bicycle manufacturer.
Yeah.
And so I was exposed to manufacturing, and I was exposed to something else that was extremely important to my life's work, which is a franchise dealer program,
Mhm.
which is now an authorized dealer program. My job was to develop training materials for dealers. So that expanded because it also led to developing tool and equipment programs.
Yeah.
And the folks that I worked with back in the bike shop were really interested in developing that, and it started the Park Tool Company,
Right.
which some of the folks in the bike industry know.
Yeah.
Um, and I was able to work with them and help them develop tools and equipment for Schwinn. And my Schwinn experience moved on from sales and working with dealers to many other areas. And I was privileged to be able to serve as Vice President Marketing. I was Vice President Product Safety and Governmental Affairs. That's a mouthful, but it dealt with regulation of an industry
Yeah.
and standards for products. And I also was Vice President Purchasing. And so I left Schwinn in April of 1990 and went into the, believe it or not, campground business in Wisconsin, but led bike tours. So I
Yeah.
saw a whole different aspect of the business. Went into consulting and have been a consultant in the bike industry ever since. NBDA, National Bicycle Dealers Association, has been a big client and is currently a very large client of ours.
Mhm.
My specialty right now with the NBDA is working on legal and legislative work and primarily tariffs, which are a big issue. So I
Mhm.
hope that covers it, gives you all of the touch pieces. If I missed something out, left something out, holler.
I think those are the key headlines, Jane. Just to reiterate, your consultancy is Human Powered Solutions, yeah, which you co-founded with Mike. Is that right?
Yes, Mike Fritz is my business partner.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for that. I think that there's obviously a lot more detail there, but I think that does this justice for the purposes of the call today. So we'll jump straight into the questions if that's okay with you, and get the
Absolutely.
conversation going. So I mentioned the supplier relationship and buyer decisions. That's going to be the first thing that we look at. And I guess, as we just covered, you've been part of the industry for a long time. You've seen a lot of kind of different phases of the industry. And what's different about the pressure that independent cycle retailers are under right now compared to maybe previously challenging periods or downturns? Is there anything different that you're seeing now in comparison to that?
Yes, unfortunately, it's much different. Um, the level of uncertainty is the highest I've ever seen, and that's creating anxiety.
Mm.
But we've also, over the time frame that I've described, from 1957 to today, in 2026, we've seen a global evolution of the bike business.
Hmm.
And I mentioned to you earlier when we were chatting, the American bike business is totally import dependent.
Hmm.
As much as people like to chirp about the idea of manufacturing in the US, we do not have bicycle manufacturing here. It's not a near term probability. And we can
Hmm.
discuss that if people want to go into detail, but we are import dependent. Therefore, tariffs and geopolitical issues buffet us like being at sea in a storm.
Yeah.
Um, Other transitions we've gone through, when we went to the mountain bike as an example, and that became a big deal. We didn't have the economic uncertainty to the degree we do now.
Hmm.
You know, yes, we had uncertainties, we've had uncertainties, but, you know, we've got all this multiplicity of problems, and it boils down to, can a dealer get a loan? Can a dealer work with a supplier? What's the attitude of the supplier? What's the responsibility that the dealer is taking on that they didn't take on before in product liability? Um, and the big issue here is the uncertainty of, will I get a product? and what will that product cost?
Thank you for that. And I guess I was listening to the NBDA podcast the other day, and you were on there with Fred and Mike, and Fred made a comment. I think it was around the suppliers and how the relationship with independent retailers works, and how there was a degree of, well, more recently he perceived a bit of a shift in that model. I don't know if that was fair comment, but the relationship between brands and retailers, there seems to be a sense that that's changed a little. And from where you sit, what's driving that change more recently, if you agree there is one?
I agree there is one. It's economic. It's money.
Yeah.
It's the simple fact that a supplier is under a lot more pressure today than they've ever been under. And part of it is shifting tariffs.
Mhm.
And the other piece is sourcing.
Yeah.
And the availability of sourcing, which countries are tariffed in which way relative to importation into the U.S. market. Believe me, for decades, tariffs were an issue nobody even worried about because they were set. It was
Yeah.
grooved. It was the same thing. It's obviously shifted and changed a lot. So the relationship with suppliers has changed accordingly. Dealers don't know what pressure the supplier's under in reality, but
Mhm.
the dealer in turn is having to deal with pressure from a supplier that simply wants to sell them stuff and get paid.
Indeed.
There's back in the day, I was president of Giant in the United States for a period of time, ran the wholesale operations. So worked with our finance managers around the country with our distribution centers and the central finance manager. And we cared, as did Schwinn, as did other manufacturers brands of the day. This would be in the period 90 to 2000.
Mhm.
The finance managers really cared about working with dealers, setting up plans with dealers for payment, making sure a dealer was able to pay the debt because they wanted to keep them in business. I don't sense that the finance managers today even have that kind of time.
Yeah,
So,
spread a bit more
so
thinly
dealers,
now.
yeah, and dealers don't get the benefit of a supplier when they've got a financial problem, of a supplier really saying, look, let me help you, work with you, let me help your business, let me look at your financials and help you through this problem. They don't have the time. They're basically saying pay up.
Got you. Yeah, it becomes much more of a transactional conversation then, rather than holding hands or guiding people through anything. And I think it's really important to have that guide as well as an independent retailer, isn't it? Because you don't necessarily need someone to give you all the answers, but you do need to know that someone's in your corner helping you out with that kind of thing, right?
Exactly. And that advice can be so beneficial not only to get the supplier paid, but the
Mm.
lesson the dealer learns,
Mhm.
the education they get so they don't do it again, or if they do get in trouble financially, how they get out of it and get out of it as quickly as possible with all parties being as happy as possible. You're correct. That's missing. And the only gap, or that gap, is now being filled to the extent possible by the NBDA in the United
Mhm.
States, and by the associations in both the UK and Europe, in trying to advise dealers how they. I'm sure the pressures are the same
Yeah.
in some form. So how do I work with a vendor to work this debt off, get it paid off? How do I work with my bank? But that that whole sense of uncertainty and the disruption that's going on, has got to be dealt with in some way.
Agreed, agreed. And I guess, I guess what that's adding up to is that, the conversations in terms of buying stock, that kind of thing, they have the potential to go wrong, right? Just as a worst case outcome. Um, what does that look like in practice to you? I think, obviously being on the supplier side, obviously being on the retailer side as well. When that doesn't go right, what are the things that you're generally seeing as part of that?
Conflict. Um, the the old time sales rep that we knew in the industry, in Europe, in the UK, in the United States, Canada, was an advisor, a counselor. They were welcomed. They had the time to come in and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and sit down and give advice and talk about here's what's happening in my territory.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that kind of time today.
Mm-hmm.
So that advisor's also been taken out of the equation.
Yeah.
They're under pressure. And many of those reps have been taken out of the equation because the companies can't afford them. They simply are financially not able to do it. So now they put somebody on a telephone or a computer and it's telemarketing. And so you're going to get a call once a week from, a rep from a company that's going to say, okay, what's on the order book today? No conversation, a little bit of chatter because they get to know each other, but there's not that relationship. There's not that understanding. And worse yet, to me, there's not an understanding of that retailer's demands. So it's a matter of these come in boxes of 12. How many you want? And no real ability to plan open to buy or to get into the nuances that a rep had the time to devote to working with counseling a retailer. So it looks differently. And I think it boils down in some cases to, do you want it or don't you?
When you put it like that, it's a real shame, isn't it? Because it feels like there's a generation of knowledge being lost from the industry in many ways, isn't there?
Yes.
And in the oldest traditions, there's always that knowledge share, that passing on of knowledge. I hadn't seen it like that. That's really interesting. It feels quite reductive, doesn't it? And I guess there's almost two levels, isn't there? There's one level on an industry level that you kind of miss out on, and there's the independent retailer level. I guess, is there an industry cost to retailers that they might be buying on instinct now rather than just data, because that kind of conversation isn't happening? And what's the cost to an individual shop as well? So there's the industry side and there's the individual shop side.
I think the whole industry saw that over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We talked about the bullwhip effect,
Mm-hmm.
and that is starting at retail. A consumer comes in to one shop and wants something in another shop, and so on. And so now you got 6 shops asking a rep. The rep in turn turns that to 12. The wholesale house turns that to 24. The manufacturer that gets the order turns it to 48, and so on. The bullwhip effect, because of COVID and because of the pandemic, became the rule. And the sensible approach to open to buy and to making sure that you were working to a JIT system, just in time purchasing, got thrown out the window.
Right.
So that was bad and created this backlog and this backup of inventory that took us years, and we're still suffering from trying to get inventory in balance. And now you've got a situation that's less sensitive and less knowledgeable and has less time. So there's more, it throws more uncertainty into the process. And you're correct. What's lost is the wisdom of the past. And if that isn't in some way, shape, or form instilled and brought to bear at the retailer point of, should I buy this? Well, today you got to look carefully at whether it's a good decision, and the open to buy is very important. The data, the information, the statistics that go to, am I selling these? And if it's a brand new item, it gets to, will I sell it?
Yeah.
Is this saleable within the environment that I've created in my shop? Talking to your staff and how that feels, or how they feel about it. So you're correct. The loss of that on-site wisdom that I relied on because this rep came in and I got a relationship with him and I've worked with them for years and they give me good advice. I will tell you for a fact, and if you've been in the business, you know this, that any rep worth their salt that was making the top money on the road was doing it by telling some dealers don't buy. They were honest. In other words, they made their money because they were honest with a retailer, and they said, Mr. Dealer, don't buy this. I'm telling you, don't buy it. Wait till the next round. They don't get that advice today. They don't get that honest, let me tell you what's happening in the territory, don't buy it, approach. What they get is well, you said earlier, transactional. We have become a much more transactional business today than we ever were, and it's not good for the retailer. It's not good for the business.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great answer, great response. And Dana's actually written in with a question there. He's joining us from Nebraska. Hi. Dana said, I understand the barriers and challenges that owners face in the bicycle industry, but what is the best leverage point for an independent bike dealer, retailer in today's landscape? I guess that's in relation to those conversations with suppliers. What do you perceive to be the best leverage point in those conversations?
A good POS system and an up-to-date knowledge of your business, like daily, so that you can say, okay, let's sit down and look, even if you're talking to on the phone or by computer to a rep as a telerep as opposed to an in-person rep. I think the most instructive and best tool you can have is, let me show you the data. Mm-hmm. This is a similar item in my store. Mm-hmm. This is that item in my store. Now you can talk about merchandising and other, how do I sell more, but you really, I think the retailer, to answer that question, is it's really good point of sale data.
Yeah, you can't argue with the data, can you? The data is the reality, basically. Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. And there's some skill involved, but the data is the base.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's what supports decision making and interpretation, right? That's why you can go into those conversations. But there's a degree of gut feel and experience that goes into that, but the data underpins everything. So one more question about the kind of supplier relationship side of things. I mean, there's a lot of shops that when they're under pressure, they've leaned into the service or repair side of the industry in terms of the retail operation. Is that a sustainable foundation, or does that come with different kinds of risks in your view?
Well, I think it's sustainable. I think it's necessary. And yes, it comes with a lot of risks. But then what doesn't today? The risks will be modified or made to go away, mollified by education, by learning, by what you're able to get in the way of professional training and education. Service, I advise, as does the NBDA in the United States, that dealers expand service operations. Some of this we just saw in an editorial that Rick Vosper, another name in the industry, wrote in Bicycle Retailer Industry News, and that was specifically something Rick doesn't do ever, and that is he recommended a service which is run out of Canada relative to simply stated, dealers should service, should repair all of the drive systems, the electric drive systems that are made for e-bikes. And don't turn them away. And I think that's correct in these times. The economic issues that specialty independent retailers face are, again, going to be what consumers face in the market. And one of the key issues here is shoring up revenue and making sure that revenue is profitable. So from a dealer's standpoint, what's made us unique over the years, going back to my day in 1957 as a kid, a teenager, when I started to work for a fix-it shop, essentially a bike shop that did mostly repair work and sold a few bikes. And that is repair everything. I remember as a kid, Art Engstrom, who's still alive, by the way, one of the partners that I worked for in the retail business, he's in his 90s. Art was a welder by trade, and he'd worked for the Great Northern Railroad, and a lady brought in an umbrella, and she wanted to have it silver soldered, and Art took it in and was going to charge her for it. I was just a kid and kind of said, don't you think open flame around an umbrella is a kind of a dicey proposition? And the end result was, after burning up the umbrella, he had to buy her a new one. So there is a point where you have to learn and not do that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there were the other jobs that he took in because he and Howard Hawkins, his partner, took in because they were a fix-it shop and they relied on that service. And by the way, he didn't have any more experiences like the umbrella, but he learned from his mistakes. So yeah, I think service is a key, but I do think the point that Vosper's making in this recent article is also very important. That is, get the education and training. Make sure that you take advantage of the service programs that are out there, and a lot affect the vast majority of the ones I'm aware of are now online as well. You remember in the day when we used to have a manual? Well,
Yeah,
no, you don't need that anymore. It's online.
all online.
Yeah, and I think that it's bike shops servicing everything. And in your market in the UK and the United States, one of the issues is bike shops don't. A lot of bike shops won't service mass merchant product.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this to me is the bike shops that won't service all of the electric drive systems. Stop that. Take everything that comes in, but learn, educate your staff and educate yourself. Learn how to do it safely for everybody and learn how to do it profitably so you can build that piece of your business up.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That's where the opportunity sits, really. So yeah, that's very interesting in terms of expanding the service offering for sure. Having a good handle on how that performs for you on a financial level is obviously critical, but there's more to go at, right? There's more activity to go at.
And I would add to that, even though I don't want to harp on the obvious, is this goes back to a good POS system that is keeping absolute track of what's occurring in that service department.
Makes total sense. That makes total sense. So I think you mentioned kind of online in part of our previous conversation there. I'm going to move on a little bit towards the channel and more specifically kind of where customers are engaging with you, whether that's in store, online, that can be a range of places. But so when you look at how independent bike shops show up online, I mean, what do you generally see?
A variety, a wide variety at this point.
Mm-hmm.
From the bare minimum, there are a lot of offerings within the market today, or there are some offerings for a dealer to just have someone build a website for them. Mm-hmm. Or there may be a local web developer to build a website. And so that's the bare minimum. Here's my bike shop, here's my hours, here's what we sell, here may be some product that they show, but they're not commerce enabled. From that to a full commerce enabled operation, available 24/7 to a consumer, that's also reaching out and doing. I heard a new term yesterday in an NBDA mingle, which is social selling, which hadn't really, for an old guy like me, just hadn't hit home yet. And all of the dealers that were in the mingle yesterday morning were in some way, shape, or form involved in social retailing. Yeah. And it all centered on different degrees of how they had commerce enabled that business. Even the service side that we just talked about can be commerce enabled and be aggressively marketed on a good dealer website by making appointments, by consumers being able to get service jobs evaluated online, get estimates, particularly in the e-bike community, and then in turn being able to book a time to bring that product in to get the most efficient turnaround of service time. So I see all of that, and I also see some of the bike shops that are using the services available that will build different systems or different parts of the website for the consumer, for the dealer, and including consumer outreach.
Yeah.
Which today is getting more and more to the point it can be automated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if a bike shop, we can get into this, but a bike shop, one of the primary issues of a bike shop relative to a commerce enabled website to me is collecting data about customers. people that spend money with you, and making sure you've got a current record, including all the service transactions. Why? So I can go out and market to them via the web, via my website, and also online through the internet. Reach those consumers, offer the service special, bring them into the website, come to the website and visit and see what we're offering in the way of new, etc. So all of that's out there. I think that there's a great deal of education that needs to be done, because, as an example, the NBDA just published the current cost of doing business study.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is invaluable, because what it's going to show is how many dealers are online and how many dealers are not. Well, I'm sure it's shifted to a few more, but the real issue here is we have, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we still have too many dealers that I'm not seeing when I look for that variety, because they're simply not online.
So, I mean, I guess I was going to ask, generally speaking, is that gap between a physical store and a digital presence something that you generally see retailers are like conscious of or concerned about? Or, is it something that people are like, if it arrives, it arrives. I'm not necessarily bothered about it. Or are they actually focusing on that and thinking, actually, this is an opportunity to grow my operation, gather more data, that kind of thing? Is there an aspiration to do that?
Unfortunately, not enough, in my opinion. I think that needs to be promoted, and dealers need to be quickly educated as to the value of doing that to their business, to making money.
Yeah. And there's probably just to bookend that point, because do you think that is literally costing people before customers walk through the door? Not being visible online, that is costing people, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because we're all over the world. We're an online world. Yeah. We are a community of online people, like it or no. Yeah. So the vast majority of the world's population are looking at those little screens and then going home and looking at a big screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we're not part of that world as retailers and merchants, and merchandising and presenting ourselves that way, I think it's a problem.
For sure. And just to zone in on maybe some of the motivations around that, what do you think prevents a lot of independent bicycle dealers or retailers like getting their online presence right? Do you think it's things like resource, or is it awareness, or is it something else that you struggle to define, or what do you think that is getting in the way of that?
I do struggle to define it, but I'm beginning to think this year a lot of it is scale. Mm-hmm. In the sense that we've had a generational change where, and again, in the United States market, baby boomers are aging out. Well, that includes leaving the bike business.
Yeah.
They're selling the business, or they're just walking away from the business. And the new dealer that comes in is not getting the education they were getting in the past. Mm-hmm. The Schwinns aren't there anymore. I mean, they're gone. And so the dealer programs are not there. The education is only there through the associations. And a few bright stars relative to distribution. And so you've got Madison is the one I remember in England, where I actually they used to invite me once a year to come and speak at their events for a while. Enjoyed it greatly. But you don't have that kind of educational support. QBP in the United States, Quality Bicycle Products, is the other example I would give, because they are trying to get back into doing their Frostbike event. Mm-hmm. The dealer is not being encouraged enough, in my opinion, by the rest of the trade.
Yeah.
I think we're at a point where that transactional issue is starting to tear away, and we're now beginning to move into a more relationship, both between the dealer and the brands and manufacturers, more importantly, the dealer and the consumer. It's facilitated by online and everything that goes with that. And so I'm also of a mind that the transactional way will disappear over time, and it's going to be out of the bike business because it's not productive, it's not profitable. And
Yeah.
so the relational approach, the relationship and the substantial relationship and the significant experiential both relationship and way of doing business, I think, is what's going to take over in short term, like starting shortly. That's going to also rely very heavily on knowing, on knowledge, on data, on collecting information.
Well, I guess that kind of segues nicely into probably my last question in this section, which, if a shop's figured out how to connect their physical presence, the different channels that they operate across, if they've got that right, what does that look like in your view?
It looks like a consumer, from a consumer standpoint or from the public standpoint, is what they relate to as a connected business. That they're being, it's proactive in the sense that on my little screen, I'm getting advertisements, adverts, or information, or the thought of the day, or the place to ride today, or the service deal of the day. And when I go online and I'm looking at my emails, I've got messages.
Yeah.
I've got a promotion. I've got, hey, come on in and see us because glad to see you again. It's, any of those outreach messages. So I think it's the consumer seeing that presence, that marketing, but it is proactive, experiential marketing. It's really reaching out and taking the database, the list of customers, and using that list effectively and multiple ways and multiple times.
Are you speaking my language now, Jay? As a marketer, that is something that I always try and aim for, is that relevance, that sense of belonging for the end user, that experience for people, because we exist in a crowded landscape in terms of communications, time, availability, all of those kind of things. If you can cut through and get that relevance, it's really important for your customers, right? For your prospects. So yeah, that's a great answer. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Dana asked a bit of a follow-up to the original question around, are there any AI tools available to retailers that are industry specific? And Patrick's come on with a great comment about making AI tools kind of relevant. They will learn over time. But Dana, what I would say is watch this space. I think it's a very interesting question at this point in time. And I would highly recommend to kind of watch this space over the coming months as well. So I think that covers the channel part. Okay. What I'm going to talk a little bit now is probably what we touched on in that last conversation, a little bit around the customer experience, right? And the component parts that we've talked about, really, they should add up to a great experience for the customer, I would say. So what should a bike shop that's really working feel like when you walk into it as a customer?
I think it should be welcoming. As a customer, here's what I used to, and I went out and did sessions with bike shops on training and education. One of the things that I advocated is you should have mom as a greeter. Every bike shop should have a greeter. In other words, one person on staff whose primary assignment is to say, hi, how are you today? How can I help you? How can we help you? And then in turn, my advocacy was always make that person mom.
Right.
And for several reasons. One, I want to make sure that people walk in and perceive immediately the part of my experience is for women.
Yeah.
I get rid of the problem that a lot of bike shops have of ignoring women and older people like me, etc. But an older woman being mom not only will direct people, how can I help you? Oh, that's for our service department. Go right back to the bench there. See that guy with the hat? His name is Jim. Say, Jim, Alice sent you over. Tell him your problem. He'll take care of you. It's having that as opposed to, hi, how can I help you today? The person that's out front, like I was when I started in that bike shop, and I was precocious. So at 12 or 13, I wasn't afraid to engage with people. But a lot of the people that are first encountered are reluctant to talk, reluctant to engage, don't really give you what mom would give you if mom said, "Hi, how can I help you today?"
Yeah,
So
there's a warmth to that, isn't there? And there's a
yeah,
knowledge to that as
yeah.
well.
So
Yeah, for
you
sure.
you get the drift of what my advocacy is, which is make sure that every customer that walks in that store is greeted immediately. I don't care if you're swamped. There are people's assignments, and they understand that their job is to say, "Excuse me a minute, I'll be right back to you. Hi, how can we help you today?" Make people feel welcome and make that welcoming, warm, and not only multi-generational, but don't differentiate between young athletics and fit athletics and older people or men and women. It's universal.
Mhm.
Everybody's welcome. Everybody's a potential customer. Everybody should feel that they're in the right place and that they're going to have a good experience here.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there that like staff are central to that experience, and I think those guide notes in terms of like what you should aspire to kind of offer as part of that experience as a staff member to anybody walking into your shop is fantastic. I think how do if you're a shop owner with multiple staff, like do you have any advice for anyone looking to get that right and to manage that in a consistent way?
Oh, yeah. I think, first of all, you do no less than weekly education sessions within each store. I used to work for a Wisconsin dealer that today has, I think, 12 or 14 stores. He had maybe 9 or 10 when I worked for him. And consistently at his headquarters store, I would walk in the front door, and I do this every month. I'd walk in the front door, walk from the front door to the back door. This is a big store,
Mhm.
slowly, and never be acknowledged. Get to the back, turn around, walk out, and then go and get paid by him to tell him that his staff was ignoring me, which
Right.
is ridiculous. This is a 10 store top dealer, and the planning part of this was, look, here's my advice. Weekly staff meetings. In a store like that, the manager either should be replaced. You talk to him about
Mhm.
what your standards are, and if they can't manage it, they should be replaced, because they need to have daily scrums.
Mm.
In the morning before that key is turned, you get everybody together, even the folks in the shop, and you talk about the day and you talk about what they're going to do and what they're going to accomplish. You bring enthusiasm to the process. And you also explain that everybody that walks through that door is a potential customer, and they are more than that, they're a friend. And
Mhm.
you treat them that way. So you try to bring some enthusiasm to the process, and then you watch your people. And here's the mistake I think shops make around the world is um, the folks they put up front to be that greeter or to be that first contact aren't always the best people that want to be outgoing and are not introverted. So you're going to say, all right, I want you to greet people, watch them. If they don't and they aren't interested in meeting the public, put them in the back to deal with stock if you can
Mhm.
afford that. If you
Yeah.
can't, let them go. um, we take too long to make that decision if a person isn't right. But we up front, we've got to have people that like people who want to engage, people who want that's fun to have an experience to sell
Yeah.
or to get to know. Even if I don't sell them today, I want them to come back. I want to put them in my computer system as a prospect and reach out and say, "Hi, John, this is Jay. Remember we met yesterday? You came in the store. Just checking. What can I do to help?"
Yeah.
So,
That
two
requires quite a
things.
bit of passion there for the challenge, doesn't it, as well? Yeah, for
It
sure.
does, and
Yeah.
I think it's up to the owner to make sure that the people that meet the public are as people oriented as possible, and the introverts are back setting up bikes or fixing stuff or doing stock. And again, to emphasize the two key points is train regularly, train no less than weekly, and scrum every day.
Mhm.
That enthusiastic scrum. or during the scrum use as an opportunity to say, here's the product we're gonna focus on today. So if I haven't screwed that up too badly or confused it too badly, that's my advice.
No, I think that's perfect answer, and I think you touched on something there that I've heard you talk about on other podcasts, on the NBDA podcast more recently as well, was about having fun, and I think that's so important, and bringing the fun back to bikes. Okay, I guess what does that mean for the independent? You've talked about it on the shop floor there, but I think there's a broader application to it, right? What does that mean for independence and growing the next generation of riders? Because that continuity is so important, right?
I got into this because I've gone from walking that floor of that shop to be ignored to working on tariffs and working on the financial issues, and this led to one day telling Heather Mason that, we got to get back to, I've got to get back to the fun of the bike business.
Yeah.
When I worked in the bike business on the floor in a shop, it was fun. And we made it fun. The people we worked with, the managers, the owners of the store. And I think that radiates, and you're right. I've learned from experience that the consumer sees that and senses that.
Yeah.
They know the difference between being ignored, certainly, and being greeted enthusiastically, but they also know the difference between somebody just putting the time in and somebody that really wants to be helpful to them. And I think you can add to that, talking about to your prospects, to your customers, to your staff about what they can do and what you as a group can do to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also extends. Yeah, I'm like a prominent runner. I quite like running. That sense of community around shops usually develops as well. It's especially the case with cycling, right? That kind of community focus also gives you a lot more scope to have fun with that customer base, etc. I think it lends itself so well to that, right?
It does, and it's a thing that today I think is extremely important, because I know you're experiencing this, because I talk to folks in the UK all the time about data and stats and so on.
Yeah.
That you're experiencing bad heat and heat experiences where you can't go out and ride, storms that you can't go out and ride. Well, that I think leads to talk to the people that come into your business, that are part of your business, that are in your database, about how we're going to watch the weather. We're going to pick this good day, this good week, this good night when we can ride when it's cool, and have fun. Go out and enjoy ourselves. And do that by saying we're also going to take safety first, and we're going to make this a safe ride. We're going to make this a safe family ride. We're going to make this a safe ride for your kids. We're going to talk about what we can do to instill an enjoyable experience into that which, you say you're a runner. Well, there's some cyclists that go out there just to hurt. Well, we're even going to make that fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that lends itself really well to the social channels that you mentioned before, right, for shops as well. So that's great for that sense of community. Just for everyone watching, we're going to go into a couple of last questions here with Jay. If you've got any questions that you want to ask, now is the time to pop them into the chat. Otherwise, we will wrap up relatively on time, I think, which is great. So penultimate question here. I guess when a customer leaves a well-run independent and then comes back, what made them come back? I mean, what's the thing that tips the balance, for the independent there?
I think it's the communication from the time they left the shop to the time they came back, and that is reaching out and, as I said, touching base. Hi, this is Jay. How's the bike riding? How's the accessory working? Have you gone on the routes we recommended? Asking questions, reaching out and touching, reaching out and asking, how can we help make it a more fun experience? And so I think today in this environment, I think shops, it's incumbent upon shops to do that. I'll give you one that is almost as old as I am, but it still works. Write a postcard. Write a postcard. people appreciate getting, believe it or not, getting personal mail.
Mhm.
Write a postcard. Take the time to say, "Hi, John. Hope the bike's working out fine. Just checking in to see how you doing. Hope you're having fun!" Explanation point.
Mhm.
But to your point, come on in and see us. Invite them back in. Do events to invite them back in. Send the postcard and say, "Look, I'm doing a special mechanic service, so we could teach you how to change flats. We
Yeah.
could teach you how to repair your bike. No charge. We'll have coffee. We'll have a soft drink, even beer. I mean, I'm not anti-alcoholic. You can bring them in for a brew. But it's I think that that's part of the marketing today.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not it happens by happenstance. They're in there because you've reached out to them and they want to be back.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone's going to be, but I think that's the ultimate goal.
I guess a lot of it is as a shop owner or as as somebody who works in a shop. It's about making sure that a lot of the things in the background are taken care of so that you can take the time to focus on that kind of approach that builds that loyalty, that builds that community, that builds that experience for customers, right? So it's about making sure everything in the background is running as it should so that you have the latitude to do that.
Yeah, I think this goes to, and we spend more time today in our consultancy looking at enterprise systems
Yeah.
for large
Yeah.
and small. I think that the real key to the future is retail businesses of all sizes. There's a guy that comes on the NBDA morning mingles that is a garage repair shop.
Mhm.
And I mean, when he comes on and you see his store, the garage door is open, you can see the car in the parking lot, but that's his business.
Mhm.
A great deal of it is conducted by communication via the internet. And so he's got a loyal customer base. It's reaching out. It's being part and parcel of a business and making sure that the customers are aware that you're there doing business.
What's that? One last question, Jay. I don't think we've got any other questions to cover because we've done a great job of covering a lot of that from the conversation. But to round up as kind of one last point, if you had one thing to say to an independent bike dealer or retailer that was watching this, what would that thing be?
One thing.
One thing, if you could
Uh,
sum it up. It may be multiple, I don't know, but maybe I'm being too reductive by saying one thing. But is there anything like that you think is a piece of wisdom that has to be passed on?
well, I think right now I am focused on data, and not data for the industry per se. We lack data, by the way, and I think that that's one of the issues we need to work on. But for me, I think the individual retailer, especially bike retailer, I don't care how small they are. Let's take my buddy that's got the garage repair operation. He admittedly is not big. He's small. But he has got a really good, solid database, and he works the database. His relationships are through his database, um, and he builds his relationships that way. And I think that to me is more than one item, but it's one area of a business where bike shops have to understand the future, and the future is a database. It's a database that not only you keep up, you make sure is current, but you work it. You make sure you reach out and use it on a regular basis. Now, if the little guys ever want to get big, they're going to have to do that in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And so today, going back to what we started out with, that knowing everything about your business, your specialty bicycle retail business, your brand in the community, to me depends upon how strong your both acquisition and your control of and use of your data is.
I think that's a great answer, because I always think of the data being part of the equation. It'll never make the decisions for you. It relies on your experience as a
Right.
shop owner. But if you haven't got the data, it's just operating blind, isn't it? I think, yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't be making decisions today in this era of change and uncertainty without data, knowing your business, and try to hedge the decisions, err on the side of knowledge. I don't know if it's going to sell, but here's what the data shows me will sell. This shows what I have done in the past. This is how I've made money. And use that information, that data, to inform your future purchases, your open to buys, the way in which you stock the shop, what you say to consumers, and so on as you move forward in merchandising.
Love that, Jay. Thank you. I really appreciate your time here today, and thank you to everyone that registered and joined. It's great to see you on here, and Jay, like everybody appreciates the wisdom that you've shared today. I very much appreciate your time. So, on that note, I think we'll wrap things up, and who knows, we may get the chance to do this again if that works for you.
Thank you.
We can talk
It's
about that too.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Everyone, we'll see you on the next one. Watch this space, and yeah, have a great day wherever you are. Cheers.